Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman. This is the stream about working on a software as a service using the Python programming language and the Django web framework. We're going to get started here. And tonight, we're going to pick up from where we've been going in this series of changes. I've been working week after week on making deployment simpler. So my current deployment process has a lot of steps. It uses Ansible. It has a lot of stuff sitting on the server, executing stuff that I really don't want it to. And we've been going through a long series of steps to take all of that work, or a lot of that work, and move it up to continuous integration. And if it can live on continuous integration, then it is just less risk for the server. So we're going to continue on that path. Sorry, I'm going to click over some here, do some stuff. We're going to continue down that path and pick up where we left off last week. Last week, if you joined in, we were running Webpack in CircleCI. CircleCI is the continuous integration tool that I use for College Conductor. College Conductor is the software as a service that I work on. And we got as far as like building the stuff, but then we didn't get to hooking it into actual deployment. So tonight, we're going to work on this issue, which I'll drop a link in the chat. We're working on, and then ask me anything about Python or Django. So before we get started, if you want to follow me on Twitch or YouTube, where I upload recordings later, I would really appreciate it. I have links above that if you want to find out stuff about me or follow some of my writings. I write on technical stuff. You can do that too at mattlehman.com. I've recently changed some things on my website, so now that I've got a dedicated space for this particular stream. So if you want to catch show notes about this stream, I've got mattlehman.com/building SaaS, and that will give you show notes. I'm still catching up on putting all of my previous streams up there, but eventually it'll be the full catalog of everything I've done, and I hope to include some useful links. Also, I created a Patreon, so if you find this useful to the point where you want to throw a couple bucks my way, I would appreciate you doing that. I'm at MB Lehman on Patreon as well, and you can find me there. I do have one patron, and I said that I would just give a shout out to them. So thank you to Patrick for being a patron, first patron to the Patreon page. Really appreciate your contribution. Okay, so let's get into it. We're going to go figure out how to get the thing that we made from CI and put it up onto Amazon S3. I use Amazon for block storage, or is that right? No, object storage, excuse me. S3 is more of an object store than a block store, I think. So that's going to be the place that stores all of the static files. And the static files, if you need a reminder, is my JavaScript, it's my CSS, it's my images that are part of my service. The Python bit, the dynamic bit that's running, is what we had been working on previously, and that part's already done and live on the production site. So we're continuing on this path to simplify. As soon as we get static files from CI into a new location, then we can stop doing the work of building those static files on the actual production web server and start ripping down the pieces. So that will be really cool once we get there. So, but we have to get there. So right now the archive files are kind of locked away in CI, and we got to get over there. So how do we start? We start by creating an S3 bucket to store these files. In the last stream, what happened was I ran an npm command that ran Webpack, and Webpack dumped all of the files that it could produce, the compiled JavaScript stuff from transpilation, the CSS files. It dumped them all into one place, and then we told CircleCI to package up that place into a tarball. And to make that abundantly clear, let's look at the Circle CI config so we can see what I'm talking about. So here was most of the step that happened last time. We had to do some building of JavaScript dependencies, and then we told Webpack to run. And then in a later step, after we did some manipulation on the Python side, we get to this spot where we do this step of creating this assets tarball, I called it. Assets is just going to be, it was the name of the directory where all this stuff got dumped. And oh, that's not true. It's actually getting dumped to static. But it represents the assets that we care about. So I'm creating a tarball that is matching this pattern of assets along with the SHA-1 sum, so that when we get to deployment later, we'll be able to reference that. So the next thing to do is mirror what we're doing with the Python packaging step. So we have something similar here with the Python code, where this package shell that you see here is generating this PYZ conductor package, and that's all the Python code. And so we want to follow a similar command that you can see in this step of this AWS S3 copy, and give it a wildcard to match on the name of the file, and then give it an actual bucket. And so what's missing right now is there is an apps bucket on S3, but I don't yet have a new bucket to put these static files. So let's do that. And in order to do that, I've got to log in to the console. So I'm going to switch over to the secret mode, where you should hopefully still be able to see me, but I got to log in so that I'm not sharing passwords and stuff. I will turn that off once I'm logged into AWS. I just don't want to show off any keys and that sort of stuff. I hope you understand. And it's kind of boring to see me watch this fill in this form, this login form anyway. So I'll get to S3, and then we'll turn that back on, so we should be able to see everything. So cool. Okay, so here we are. I'm logged into AWS. This is the management console. There are tons of ways that you can work with AWS. Maybe Bodo is more your speed if you like just doing this stuff in the command line. I don't have a lot of complicated needs of how I use AWS. My website is actually hosted on DigitalOcean, and I use AWS for these particular files, which are tiny, and then some database backups, which are also not very large. So I'm not using AWS for much. The place that we need to go to is not this public one, that's for something else, but this is the area that we want to do. And you can see there's already this apps directory, and we just need to make an equivalent thing for the assets. So I'm going to say create folder, and I'm going to call it assets. That seems like the most sensible name. And let's read what this documentation says. Okay, it's just talking about what a folder is, and you can add some extra encryption to it. I'm going to use the overlying bucket settings. How did my advisor website go? Well, I'm still, that's what I'm, if you're referring to, you called the train one, it's the same website. So we're working on College Conductor, and this is the same thing. So appreciate the question on Sandon. Welcome back. So we're working on making this deployment for this site simpler, and that's the action we're taking today. So we've got this area where now we've got a new bucket for copying up the files. So let's go back over to the Circle CI area, and hey, no problem, man. It's or gal. I actually don't know if you're a guy or girl. I don't recall. Sorry. And we're going to copy from this little bit. So we've done most of the thinking in a previous stream, which is nice. And guy, cool. and we're going to change this. So if you recall me mentioning how Circle CI works, each time we run Circle CI, it works with container technology. And containers are meant to be, you start them up, you do some work, you stop them, and every bit of state and stuff that you added to the container at that time, unless you take special action, gets thrown away. So this command, I'm going to change this to assets and tar.gz, and I'll explain it in just a second. So, and then we need to point to the bucket path. So let's break this down. We're generating something that maps to the Circle SHA-1. And actually, now that I think about it, I could probably replace this star with something like $Circle SHA-1. So we could match on the actual file. But because I might change this in the future, let's leave it this way. And what this says is find any file that matches this assets star pattern, and star is the wild card, as a reminder, if you are not a command line ninja or whatever term you like to use. It's just a way to say match anything. And so this will work because the container is only going to have a single file that matches that thing. Even though I have previous builds that will run this tar command to create the tarball, every time the container goes away, that tarball that I created in Circle CI will go away with it. So I don't have to worry about this star pulling in a new tarball every time, so that would, the first build would be 1, the second build would be 2 tarballs, and the third build would be 3. That's not how this will work because of the way that containers work. So we're telling it, take this thing that's generated here and use that as the thing to copy, and then copy it up to the college conductor assets area. And I think the thing to call out is I am not setting any additional secret settings here. The reason that works is because in Circle CI, one of the steps that I took was I added a couple of environment variables, and those environment variables define the 2 pieces of data that AWS S3, or just AWS in general, requires in order to authenticate. It's like a key and a client ID, I think, are the 2 things. So the authentication piece around this is already done. We don't need to do anything there because we did that in a previous stream. So what does that leave us with? I haven't actually written it yet, so it doesn't leave us with anything. So we're adding one little thing. We've created this new bucket. And so what I want to do is go ahead and commit this. Whoops, I actually have to add it to the Git stage. And we're going to call this copy assets to S3. And this is for what issue number is this? 375. And okay, so why do I do that? I like to tie stuff to issues for, I guess the fancy word is like traceability, but just having a solid history between my repository and the GitHub project that has all of the information. And if I do that, the benefit is I can look at any of my commits and say, oh, okay, this thing was, a sad one from when I forget it or it's not related to something. I can see that this big chunk of changes came from this. And some people might argue that you could put all of that information into an extremely detailed commit message about what's going on. There's some value to that, and I don't disagree with that point of view, but I view it as like a shortcut to that. So if I look at this one where it's talking about switching from micro whiskey to G-Unicorn, I can know that the reason why and any details that I care about are still over at this other GitHub issue. That's just to try and explain why I do my kit logs that way. Also, it helps buy a little time while CircleCI does its thing. So CircleCI should, at this point, be done or close to done with what we care about. And it's this build assets is the particular part of the pipeline that is what we're doing. So it's running all that stuff. And these 4 steps are coming from, what does Circle call them? They call them orbs. So if you want like extra functionality from orbs or from any number of things, use these orbs feature, which are prepackaged things. So there's an AWS orb for S3 that lets us take advantage of that copy command. So here's the actual command that we cared about, and it ran AWS S3 copy, the thing that we gave it as the from address and the destination to go to. And notice here that this is behaving the way we would expect it to. It's saying it found, using the wildcard, it found that particular hash, which corresponds to the circle SHA-1 hash, and it put it in the bucket. So that's all good news. We should now be able to go to the assets area and see, there it is. Cool. As well, there's also an app generated by this, and let's see if we can sort this by today. So we have the app that goes with this set of assets is also here, and this is going to be pretty important when we get to deployment, because when we're doing a deploy, we're going to look up the latest hash, and every build I do is going to generate a hash that that matches that, and corresponds to the particular commit that I did. So when it's kind of linking the assets and the actual application, the Python code, together. They're unified things sharing the same version number, and that matters because if I change something about the Python that refers to a specific asset, that I can't have a mismatch between those, or else I could potentially cause problems. Okay, so that's actually the work for uploading these to S3. That's technically done, and that's all I put on this issue, but that's not really the full issue. The other thing that we need to do is we need to add assets to deployment. That's the other part that's important to this. If we don't do that, then this whole exercise is pretty useless. So that's the next task that we're going to work through. And so we need to figure out how to do that and where to do that. So let's go back over to Ansible. Ansible, as a reminder, is the deployment tool that I'm using to do deployments. And it's broken down by roles. Each role is a set of functionality of different aspects of the deploy. I have to illustrate that, I've got a web role, I've got a database role, there's a load balancer role. All of these are like major components of the overall architecture. And the benefit of breaking them down into roles is that if I did reach a point of a certain number of traffic and I need to scale, and I'm discovering that the first thing I'd probably likely notice is that it doesn't make sense for the database to be on the same box as the web server. So I want to dedicate its own machine to that. By having a role, I can change the IP addresses of who matches to which role, and Ansible will then deploy all the important stuff for the database to a different machine if I so choose. So that's a little idea of the way Ansible is designed to work, where roles are an abstraction layer that can go with different servers. So the role that we care about for this particular chunk of work is the web role. And there's a bunch of bits in here that we're not going to change so far, but we need to get to a place where this stuff can live. And I'm trying to think of the way I want to do this. Let me walk through the thought process of the final outcome so you have a good feeling for this. There is a directory that holds all the static files so that Nginx can reference them. How does Nginx come into this equation? Nginx for my project is the load balancer. So if you visit collegeconductor.com and you go to the root request, in fact, let's make this a bit more concrete with a configuration file, which is over, I'll find it. There it is. Okay. So this is an Nginx configuration file. Nginx serves as the load balancer, and a load balancer in a larger system is designed to balance load. But what does that mean? There's a bunch of different strategies, but the simplest way to think about it, perhaps, is if you're a site with a lot of traffic, the load balancer is the front door. And when it receives a request, it will go back to the infrastructure and say, are you busy? Are you busy? Are you busy? And talking to different web servers, because maybe you're handling a lot of web traffic. And so the web server is like the Python where the Python code is running. And so for a request like collegeconductor.com at the root, just slash, they'll say, I don't know what to do with this because I haven't been configured on how to handle that path. So here you go, Python, you figure out what to do with it. And the Python server will handle that route, which maps to the index of the URLs in Django, and render a template and spit that back out to the user. It'll be a bunch of HTML. And your browser is going to process all of that HTML and find out that there are other requests in there. There are requests for JavaScript files, there are requests for image files and CSS and things of that sort. And so as soon as the HTML is parsed and the browser sees that, it says, oh, okay, I need to make more requests back to the server to go fetch those other files. This is not unique to Nginx, it's not unique to Python. This is sort of the way the web works, but I'm just trying to outline all of this so you get a framework of what I'm trying to talk about. So when that request comes back in for a JavaScript file, it will come in as the request will be something like /static, something like that. And you can see in this part of the block of the Nginx configuration file, I am actually configuring Nginx to point not at Python for those kind of requests, but to point to a particular directory on the operating system. Why am I doing that? The reason to do that is because Nginx uses some syscalls, which are ways to talk to the kernel, the core of the operating system, and it uses them to go do a very fast lookup of that data. So if it needs to load a particular file, like a JavaScript file, rather than going into the Python and letting all the Python handle that stuff, it says, nope, I got it. I'll serve up, here's this JavaScript file. It's just a file that's sitting on the disk, and I can easily handle that. So that's what the Nginx stuff is for. So my strategy for getting this content in here, I think, is going to be to put the assets, the asset tarballs, which is the collection of all the files. I want to put that next to the URL. Do I want to do that? And now I'm just talking it through. See, it makes sense. I want to put the tarball somewhere and then extract it to that static root directory. And the purpose of doing that is so that when Nginx reloads as part of this, it will look in that directory for the files that it's intended to serve, whether as CSS or JavaScript. I think that the tar command that we'll need to use to extract that stuff has a way to change directory. So we might not need to set it next to the directory. We could just set it in a known location that is going to hold all of these assets files, and just make our destination target be this particular static root directory. Okay, that was a lot of words. I'm sorry. There's no way around it. I just need to outline all of the pieces in play. So I want to look up if Ansible has a built-in tar command. I can't remember. And it looks like they might be using a kind of generic name for it of unarchive. So we need to read a little bit of documentation because I don't know how to use unarchive. Because in the last instance where we were pulling down an archive file for the Python code, it was actually meant to be an archive file. It's meant to be a singular thing. In this particular scenario where it's a bunch of pre-packed static assets, it's absolutely not meant to be a single file that is read. So we need to use this and make sure we use it correctly. And it looks like there's also some remote parameters. I don't know. Oh, I think this is like if you had it something accessible from like how to way to access something remotely, but we're getting this from S3, so I don't think that's really the case. So it looks like, let's look through the required parameters and see what's needed. We need a destination, no surprise. We need a source, also not a surprise. And that seems to be the end of it. We can look at some examples below to get an idea of what to do. So unarchive a file that is already on a remote machine. No. Oh yeah, that is kind of us, isn't it? We're going to put these in a place on our remote machine. That's true. Maybe that's what they mean by a remote source. Maybe this is intended like, let's go read what remote source says. So I had a backwards understanding of this. So it sounds like if you wanted to, you can have a tar file on the deployment machine. In other words, my Mac, and then copy it over. And that's not what we want. So we're actually going to want to use this remote source field to indicate that we're going to put it there, because we're going to do this in two steps. One will be pulling down from AWS to get the file in a location, and then the other will be the extraction. So it seems like it's pretty smart about not caring where the file is. Maybe that's just the function of how it runs. It realizes that people don't want to have to think about that stuff. If that's the case, that's really cool. There's a wrinkle in this potentially with what I wanted. We're going to have to make sure that after the first extraction, a subsequent extraction will not be nested down into a lower directory. Some commands, like if they detect that a directory already exists, will use that as the thing that says, oh, you actually meant to do an extraction within that directory. And that's really not what we want to have happen. The reason for this is I'm going to deploy static files from one version, and in the next deploy, I actually want the static files from the next version to be merged together, because Somebody might still be referencing some of those old files and need them, while we want the benefit of having new files. So that's something that we'll need to check along the way. And maybe I'll read more of these things to make sure that I understand the implications of how the name is set. Like, I've seen it vary depending on whether you include a slash at the end or not, and so we'll want to understand that. This is SE Linux stuff, which I really don't care about because I'm not using SE Linux. We should check out who the owner should be. I think it's going to be data, but we should confirm that. And we can do a lot of this stuff by getting into the server that exists, my staging server that's a virtual machine, and checking what's already there before we actually take action on some of these. So we'll probably need group and owner as well, because if we don't include those, the files will be owned by root, which I don't think is what we want. So let's get things going. I'm going to start a staging server so we can inspect a little bit of what's there. Because I already have static files that get deployed there today, it's just that they're built on the machine during the deploy. So we're kind of merging into an existing scheme, and then we're going to, what are we going to do? We're going to rip out the old scheme, sorry. And I didn't start Vagrant before the stream, so gotta wait for that. Okay, not too bad. So this stuff is in var dub, I think. I don't have permission to do that with a Vagrant account, so we're going to change the root account and cd to var dub. The files that we care about are, okay, so I think that what this thing has actually been named is conductor. We can check that as the group vars, and the thing that we care about is the static root. Yep. Okay, so here's the static root. It's been named var dub conductor. That's where all the static files are going. And you can see in here there's already a bunch of versions that have been built because I haven't deleted this staging machine. And so let's check out those particular files and see who their owners are. Okay, all of these things are owned by dub data, and the group is dub data. That's true of the directories as well. Okay, so I think all of this makes sense so far. And here's the overall flow to making sure this works. I want to do two different versions of this. One version is I'm going to try to merge this data in there, make sure that is properly done. After I'm convinced that it will merge, I'm going to come into this staging area and I'm going to delete this directory entirely. I can do that because this is just a virtual machine. I'm not messing with production, and that will act as a test to say that if I were to ever move off of this scheme and onto a different server, that a fresh start could also work without trouble. So let's do it. So what do we need to do? We need to go to that web tasks file and see if static root is in here. Okay, So static root is created here. So that gives me the confidence of if I delete this directory, at least the directory will exist in the future. And you can see it's got the owner and group and the mode set. It's all good stuff. I guess I did not check. The mode of all these files is, what is that? 644 is the mode that those things are being extracted with, which is different from the directory itself, which is 750. Okay. I think all of that's fine. And look, it looks like we can also specify the mode here. So we'll do a 644 as well to match what's there. And I explained permissions in the previous stream, but short version is it controls whether you can read, write, or execute based on who you are in the system. Very common thing in Linux systems. Okay, I don't think we want copy. Okay, this might be important. Let's read this. No, we don't want this because it's saying if it's already there, don't run it. That's not what we want. We want to run it every time, whether it exists or not. Do not replace existing files. Okay, that won't really matter because the actual Tarball is going to have differently fingerprinted files, so that's okay. Right, I think that's all of the parameters. So let's go over here and let's do this nearby where the media, the actual current static files are generated. So they're currently done here with this step. And how do I want to approach this? Because we also need to verify that the files that are ending up on the staging server are not coming from this. So I might actually, for the purposes of this, want to comment this out. And we'll just have to get this right until deployment works. Yeah. I think that's the way I want to go. So first thing to do is take this and comment it out. Then we want to create a new task. And there's two steps here. First one is to fetch assets from S3. And I'm just going to copy from a previous one where we're getting the, this thing. We're going to copy from this. Because this has already been configured the way we want to. So this stuff is going to be, this object path is the path that's on the bucket. So this is that bucket name that we created. And then we need the file name, which is going to be assets. And the stuff in the curly braces is the SHA. And this is tar GZ. Okay. We're going to put this in an assets area. Asserts assets. Assets again. Tar GZ. The mode is get. The keys are the keys. Okay, so there's a problem with this so far. And that problem is that I have not created the assets directory yet. So we need to create serve assets. So there's probably a similar command up here somewhere. We're looking for serve apps. Okay, yeah. So we are going to create the assets directory. And Ansible tasks are idempotent, which means that if you run something more than once, it'll produce the same outcome. So if this directory already exists, that's the first time it runs, it will create this directory. And this is a very declarative kind of thing. It says, hey, I expect a directory to exist on the server called serve assets. And if it doesn't exist, create it. So the second time this runs, it's going to come in here, and the first thing it's going to do is check, does the assets directory exist? And if it does already, which it should on a second run, it's just going to say, okay, everything's good. So that's the idempotent nature of this particular task. So once the directory is created, and that will be a root-owned directory, it doesn't matter, it's totally fine. Then we're going to put the assets from S3 into that directory. And that's as far as we'll get this time. So this is, well, probably want to try and go ahead and do the unarchive step as well. So let's say, give another task. We're going to call it extract assets to static root. And we're going to, in order to have access to that directory, say we're the root user. And the command is unarchive. And then we need to provide all of those parameters that we were just staring at a minute ago. So let's start with the source. The source of this thing is this guy, the destination of the fetch. In fact, let's just rename it to source. Okay? Because you can view it like a pipeline. We're handing off one thing to the next. So that's the source of it. The destination is the place where we want this stuff to be unpacked. And that is the static root, which, if you need a reminder, is var www conductor. But we have a variable for it. And probably after all of this is done, I'm going to come back in here and extract some of these pieces that I've just been hard coding, serve assets, serve apps as variables. But I can't really do that until I kind of reclaim some of these things. Like the app path right now is for the git clone, but I think that's a better, like I think that could be serve apps in the future, but it's sort of claimed at the moment because of the way I used to do things. So we're saying unarchive at the static root, and we want to use that remote source flag. So remote source value of yes. And the other bit that we wanted to set the owner, the group, and the mode. So the owner is going to be www.data, the group, www.data, and the mode of 644. Actually, that needs to be octal, so 0644. So and that should match, sorry, I'm jumping around a bit. That should match the mode of the existing files. So if I do, I think it's T to sort by time. So you can see this stuff today. These are the files that were put in there. Wow, this must be previous year. Okay, because I think I did a deploy last week, so, or previous stream. Well, maybe it's been a while, but we've got the timestamps on here, so we can, after we deploy, we should be able to see that the files that are from this new version have been extracted in here, assuming all went according to plan. So let's try things out. I want to say that we've done everything the way I think it should go. We're creating our assets directory. We're fetching from S3 something that we know is there, and we're extracting it to the static root. I think that's everything that we needed to do. So under a new tab, I'm going to say work on conductor so that we can make sure that Ansible is on the path. And Vagrant Provision is the command that hooks Ansible up to my local virtual machine, and we'll run through that stuff. Hold on. Actually, now that I think about that, sorry. I want to make sure I saved. I wasn't sure. I did save. Okay. So if we did this right, it will all go through. Chances of it happening right on the first try, you just get comfortable knowing that failure is part of the game often. Sometimes you get lucky and everything is happy, but computers are hard. So it's not unusual for some piece of this to fail. So if we hit a roadblock, we will stare at the error message until it makes sense and fix it, and then try again. And that's the nice part about these deploys. The deploy is pretty short. Hey, thanks for the follow, Bisco. Once the stuff is done and we have some confidence in the test, we'll be able to start ripping stuff out, which will be really satisfying. I think, I don't know why developers get this way, but you almost get, if you're doing it long enough, you get this weird satisfaction with tearing code out over building stuff. I don't know. Maybe that's a human nature thing. I'm not really sure. Kind of like, would it be more fun to build a house or take a sledgehammer to a house? I don't know. Well, would you look at that? All of those 3 tasks just ran right here. It created the assets directory, and you can tell it made it for the first time because that changed. It fetched that from S3, and the fact that it says changed and didn't blow up means it actually did what we thought it would. And it extracted the assets to static root. So the rest of this is going to run as the load balancer. It's already done. Let's go inspect things and see how it went. So the first thing we can do immediately is look at this output and see what happened. Today is July 31st. Although, what date does this think it is? Aha, okay. My timing on my box is off, or it's on UTC, so it's doing it to a different time. So it did not do what we wanted to do. Check that out. It created a static directory inside of here, and I bet if we do an ls on conductor static, it'll be all the files that we care about, but they're at one level down. Okay, this is why we test or we deploy. Maybe there are other things about it that we can say are valid though. So the actual files in here, let's look at their mode and see if they're proper the way we want them. They are. they have 644. They're owned by the right group, right owner and right group, excuse me, and they match the other stuff. So that's cool. The other bit of this, there's probably two ways that we can fix this issue. One way is to fix the creation of the tarball. That's probably the way we want to go. And I didn't even think to check it. What do I mean? Let's look at where this tarball got put. So we know that this stuff should now exist in assets. And there it is. So if we inspect the tarball, which you can do with tar, the command to look at a tarball, which is an archive file, without actually extracting it, is T, and then the ZF. The Z is for the compression, the gzip compression, and the F is for the fact that it's a tar file. So with the tzf flag, and then you provide that, it should spit out here all the files. Okay. And I should have done this before because I'm seeing what I consider to be a mistake. And the mistake is this, that all of this stuff is prefixed by the static. Okay, that if this happened more properly, none of that would have been here. So the thing, this main.js file, for example, would have just been at the root of the tarball. It wouldn't. So, and the goal of that, I hope that's evident, is when we list, actually, so let's go back. When we did that list command to show the conductor directory, it dumped it into static as a prefix. But that's not where we wanted it. We wanted it at just dumped in here with all this other stuff. So we have to change. There's two ways to do this, and I think the easier way is going to be to change the tarball creation. And I think that's the case because I don't know how to do it from the Ansible side. Although let's spend a second. Maybe there's a way, maybe there's a setting here that will let us say actually use this path in here. I doubt that's going to be the case. So maybe there's a way from extra ops to the tar command that you can do that with. I think that's a path to sanity. Sorry, I missed your question. I haven't focused on this. The reasoning for the hashes. That's for it's for caching purposes. So if we were to look at, I think we still have the Nginx configuration up here. Yeah, we do. This is the line that explains the reasoning for those hashes. Expires max is a shortcut in Nginx that says to add a cache header that is so far in the future that it's effectively forever. That's not quite true. It's like a year or a couple of years or something like that. But it's, for the amount of traffic that a site gets and the lifetime of a file, you can view it as forever. If I didn't have the hashes on those assets, what would happen is, and let's like in your example, if let's say we had vendor.css. If my code was only producing vendor.css, and that's what the style that you saw from Bootstrap, which is what's in vendor's CSS, and I was on version 4.1 of Bootstrap. I don't remember what version I'm on, but let's say I was on version 4.1, and I found some fixes that were in 4.2, and I'm kind of making up version numbers, but it doesn't matter. And I wanted to upgrade to that version. If I was just using vendor CSS, then someone who had visited my site previously, because of the cache header that's put on the request, their browser would say, "Oh, I already have vendor.css. I'm not going to ask for the new one." So if and that's a problem, because that means that if I have essentially frozen them forever in time with that file. And the benefit of that is their browser doesn't have to download that data anymore. That's the reason why you want it. That's the good outcome out of that. The bad outcome out of that is it means you have to provide very specific file names for each of the files. And so when you see ABC234, that's what's known as a fingerprint. And a fingerprint is a way to look at the content of the file, run a hash algorithm on it, as you noted, calling it a hash, to generate a unique ID for it, and use that. So when a request comes in, my template engine will actually send out, no, really, you need to request vendor ABC234 for version, to get version 4.1 of Bootstrap. And then when I upgrade to version 4.2 of Bootstrap, it would say, it would detect, oh wait, there's changes in your CSS, so that means it's a new hash. So now for version 4.2, it's going to be vendor DEF 567 or something like that. And the browser will detect, oh, I don't have that file, so I need to go download it. Hopefully that clears up why it's in there. So it's a common performance technique to make sure that people are not fetching your static assets on subsequent visits unless something has actually changed. Okay, so we need to go to the creation command of that tar file. Yeah, you're welcome. We need to go to the creation command of that tar file and figure out how to change the directory to not include static. I don't remember what flag this is, I'm going to be honest. I've done this before, and there is a flag to change it. It might be -C, but we're going to check it out. So let's look at the man page for tar. No, it can't be -C because that's create. Oh, I was right, but just not lowercase c. So this is what we want to do. We want to tell it to change into that directory and then archive it. And what that should do is then produce that desired effect of not having static as the prefix on that. Okay. Yeah, that's the one we want. Sometimes my brain can't remember stuff. It's fun. So let's go to, whoops, did not mean to delete that. Excuse me, I'm getting a little hoarse. Let's go back to circle, circle config. And it is at this step that we want to introduce the new flag. And good grief, I'm using a version that does not include the dash, but now we want to include the dash. Okay, I don't remember how to do this. We're going to test it out. Probably have a static directory here. So here's a static directory filled with local stuff that we can test against. So if I'm trying this out today and I repeat the command that's in the circle CI config, it's create, that's the C part of that. And again, ZF are for, Z is for gzip compression, F is for tar files. And we're going to say assets. You can tell I read a lot of tests because I always write asserts. asserts foo.tar.gz. I'm going to point it at static. Run that. And now we should have an assets foo file. We do. And we can do tzf on assets foo. And you can see it's got that static prefix that we don't want. Okay, so let's remove that file and try it again. I'm going to use the same czf stuff. This time I'm going to attempt to do this. I don't actually know if this is the right way to specify flags, like, or if it, this could possibly work. tar is one of those weird arcane old commands that there's like a million ways to use it. I'm going to try this version, see what happens. So we're essentially saying we're going to change into the static directory before we actually do the archiving. So we're going to use the same file name of assets foo tar.gz, and we still want the directory that we care about to be the static directory. Oops. Cannot stat file. Okay, so that wasn't right. And that file should not exist. Okay. So let's try ditching the -c. Maybe it's because I'm using the single flag mode. It doesn't like what's going on. Try that. Failed to open static. Let's change this now to a dot. So now we're saying first go into the static directory, then capture everything here. Maybe that's the right one. Oh, come on. Well, when in doubt, go to the internet. tar-c example. Probably not going to find anything very useful because Google's not very good at finding -c, although maybe we can quote it to see if it'll find that. Maybe we don't need to provide the directory anymore. So let's try, so that format above looked like there's some flags, there's the output file name. Let's say -c static. No files or directories specified. Oh, that's for extract. Okay, I give up. What? That seemed to have worked. Ordering is weird. Oh, but it created a -c. Now I'm confused about which one is which. So that's the problem with me not checking work in between. Let's get rid of this thing. How do you delete? Oh my word. How do you delete something? Okay. This thing thinks it is an option, so, but it's just named -c. This is a weird one. Well, how do I clean that up? I cannot. So maybe single quotes? Illegal option. It's not an option, folks. No such file or directory. Oh yeah, that could help. // Thank you. That was astute. Okay. weirdness. Let's remove the assets too, because I want to get a clean example. So the one that actually seemed to pass was this thing, right? And the fact that it paused a little bit, which you probably can't tell from the stream, maybe indicates that it actually did the right thing. So let's check it out by looking at TZF and see what's in there. Cool. This is what we want. Yeah. Putting all the directories at the bottom this time, and all of those files are at the top. Cool. So that's the syntax we want. So we were pretty close over here, but we need to include -Z and then end it with a dot. Okay. And now what? Let's remove that junk file. What do we have here? We've got a modification to Circle CI to generate a new kind of file. And then also we have the new commands, which I'm pretty sure worked, or at least they worked to extract the static directory, but they have all the appearances of working the way we want. So let's commit them both. And we'll say pull assets from S3 for, what did I say this was, 375? Yeah. So we're going to push that up, let Circle CI do its thing. I appreciate the / idea, Bisco. That was in hindsight the obvious choice, but you know, sometimes you get blinded by what the heck is an error message doing. Okay, so we can watch Circle CI, I guess, while we wait. Watch the pretty graphs. It's built the Python and the JavaScript, just finished building or it started the assets. And we're gonna check and, well, we're not really gonna be able to tell from the tar command that runs in Circle CI. That's okay. Like here it is. We can tell that it ran it with the format that we want. And that is all. I do want to wait for the rest of this to finish because it also needs to put up the package, the actual Python package. So we'll give it another 30 seconds to run. And then we will try the deployment again and see what it does this time. I guess while we're at it, let's go ahead and from over here in the conductor area, let's remove this static directory that we know that we don't want, just to make sure we kind of have a clear idea of before and after. So these are all the old files that are from previous deploys. From some of these were, gosh, they must have been from last year, September last year. So I've had this virtual machine around for a while because it's been working fine. And we've got a timestamp of the current directory being modified when we just did that deploy, and that will change when we do another deploy. So we can pay attention to the 215 will be something different when it finally finishes. This is done. So I think we're ready to do a Vagrant Provision. So this actually runs pretty quickly for a couple of reasons. One is we're making Ansible runs by making SSH connections. And doing an SSH over a local host is as small of a network hop as you can get because it's the same machine. But we also did a cool addition some episodes back about integrating a tool called Mitagen as the kind of the engine for Ansible, if it's one way to think about it, that dramatically speeds up deploys. So there's a plug for Mitagen. Go check it out if you're using Ansible. It will make your deploys go faster, almost certainly. And got the static assets. Okay, so here's a good call out. So this is the second time we're running this. So as I mentioned, the tasks are idempotent, and the first time it said changed because that was the first time it had created the directory. But now it's just saying okay because the directory already exists. So that's cool to see that behavior in action. Okay, so it's done. Let's check out what's here. That looks awesome. We've got admin, we've got all these files that we care about. And so the directories that are here should have like merged with the previous directories. So if we do a listing on like the images directory that includes the timestamp, we should see old and new, hopefully. We don't. Why is that? Maybe images was a new one. What was not new? Fonts? Fonts, node modules. Okay. Well, that's not quite cool. This is not great. What appeared to happen is that it wiped out the subdirectories. And to illustrate why that could be bad, let's think through that. Like, so let's say I changed font awesome, and we talked about this hashing stuff, and ideally I would want there to be both an old and a new, because I haven't restarted Nginx yet. So if my old version of my Python app is still running and I've wiped out the files from underneath it, I could be potentially issuing 404 responses for those image requests, or in this case, a web font request. That's really not what I want. And maybe that means that unarchive is not the command we want. Maybe we want to directly use tar on the target machine, because I'm pretty sure tar by itself can extract subdirectories without destroying the old files. We should confirm that, but I think that's the case. Sometimes things aren't easy, and this is a good example of something that seems like it should be easy, of extract some files, having complications that that if you're not paying attention could mess up your site. So what should we do? I think we should simulate. How can we simulate this? We should try and simulate this on the Mac. Yeah, good. That's a good question. Would that be a good unit test? I think I agree in principle with you that it would be a good kind of test. I'm not sure how to test deployment stuff like this. Very comfortable testing like Python changes and that kind of stuff. But and maybe this could just be a personal weakness of mine. I acknowledge that. I may not just have the experience of how do you do testing of deployment and Ansible changes. But it's a good idea. So we're kind of doing a one-time manual test, which is imperfect, I recognize. But it's the way I think. I don't have all the infrastructure in place to do unit testing of deployments. So let's think about what we can do. I'm going to make a directory. We'll call it asset test. And from asset test, we will touch. Yeah, unit tests are a blessing and a curse. Like they're definitely more work to do. I hear you. So that part is kind of lame. But I've seen them save my bacon enough that I appreciate them for what they are. All right, so we're going to simulate this by creating this asset test folder. Right now it's just got a.txt, which is an empty file that I put in there. And I want to create an archive for that using the same exact pattern that Circle CI is using. So that was czf foo targz is the file name we're going to use, just a junk name. And we're going to say change directory to asset test and use the current context. And now if we inspect that with tzf, if we did it right, it should just show a.txt. Cool. So the part of this that we need to be able to do is to do an extract command. We saw that example, didn't we? When we were looking at that stuff over here. They're doing exactly that. They're doing an extract. The only flags that they're using that are different are V for verbose. That just prints out all the output. And J instead of Z because they're using BZ2 instead of GZ. Okay, but otherwise it's the same stuff. So I also realized that our test has failed to do something. Yeah, you're getting onto it. But remember the problem that they encountered was not at the root directory. That stuff seemed to merge just fine. Although I say that, maybe it didn't. Let's look in here. Yeah, so you see the stuff at the root directory was okay. Like we got this one and it didn't kill the other ones. It was only when we looked inside of a subdirectory that the problem was. So to have a real test for this problem, we need to make a directory called that lives within our test directory. I'm just going to call it bar, and we want to do touch asset test bar baz.txt. And yeah, so let's remove foo and we'll run that tar command. And again, I apologize for using, these are really crummy names but these are kind of the default placeholder names that get used in computer science sometimes. So now we have a tar that I think really reflects the problem that we're trying to solve. It's got a subdirectory, and that subdirectory has baz in it. I want to run a command that will basically synthesize going into our static root. So that command is going to be tar xzf, or extract, the name of the tar file. We're going to give the C flag again, and we're going to say, I'll call it static root just because that's a name that is representative. I have a feeling this is going to complain because static root doesn't exist. Yeah, I can't change the directory that's not there. But remember, we have an Ansible task that is already creating our directory, so we can have confidence that our test environment will be similar to this as if we had made this directory. So I'm going to run it like this and see what's in static root. Okay, it has a.txt and it's got bar. Okay, cool. The next thing I want to do is make our test area look akin to what would have been built on Circle. And what I mean by that is we now have to remove the A file. We can leave the A file alone. We have to remove the baz file from that subdirectory because that's the area that we really care about. And we're going to, let's remove the original tarball. And now I want to touch asset test bar, and I'll call it biz.txt. Okay. So if we go back to our creation command and just do that same thing again, and now if we look at the tzf output of that, we have biz. Okay, so we're mirroring the structure of the original, and we don't really care about a.txt. That doesn't matter. What we care about when we do the extraction is, do we have bar.txt, or excuse me, baz.txt and biz.txt sitting next to each other? That would be success. So let's try the extract command we had a moment ago, and fingers crossed this does the right thing, and then we just forget the unarchive command and just do straight up tar within Ansible. So let's see what that did. Now we've got static root. It has bar in it, so that hasn't changed, and both of them are sitting there. So I think that's really what we want. That's disappointing that unarchive doesn't do that, and in fairness, they could have some feature that I'd missed in my read through of the documentation. Yeah. Because I speculate this will also have other effects that we'll have to deal with. Yeah, so unarchive is the name of the Ansible command. So maybe they are using, there is an unarchive. You're right, there is an actual unarchive command, I think. No, oh, I'm thinking of unzip. Yeah. But yeah, so that's the Ansible commands are not really commands. They're like Python modules. So my speculation is that it tries to do the right thing, and like I mentioned, I didn't really have to think about merging stuff over with that command. So what's probably happening is maybe they are doing an extraction in a temp directory in the Python module and then like copying it over to the new stuff, and the root level is fine. That kind of level of copying is fine. But for recursive, since they don't really know what to do, they just blow away the old directories. That's pure speculation, but it's not unreasonable speculation either. So let's change this. We've got unarchive, and now we need to change to a shell command. I always hate doing these ones because I never remember. I did one of them recently. There it is. So there's one right here, shell. And I don't know that we necessarily need all of shell, but I'll stick with it anyway. So we're gonna copy some of this. And there's a downside to this approach, because I think what's going to happen, so we're going to have the file. That's great. But my speculation is that when we do the extraction, these are going to be root-owned files. So we might have to do this in two steps. We might have to do the extraction using tar, and then do a change owner command to change who owns all of the static files in that directory. That's what I'm thinking. But I'd rather see it and prove it to make sure I understand the system properly. So this is meaningless in this mode. Maybe tar. Maybe you can set the owner. Well, that's for... Surely there's a way in here. Tar set owner. Oh, I'd have to use the... I don't know what these values are going to be, so forget that. We'll just do a chown afterwards. Okay, that's not so bad. So we don't need any of that stuff, but what we do need is we need tar. And so I'm saying change into the assets directory where this file is going to exist. And we're going to take this chunk here, yank it, put it there. So that's the file we want to extract. We want to do extract ZF, and so we're kind of doing like a double directory change here, which is kind of funny, but or it's funny to me. I don't know if it's funny to anybody else, but here we want to go to change directory to the static root. And I think that was all that we needed, right? It was just a pure, yeah. Cool. So seems like it's good. It's got the right combination of flags to tar. It has the file name that has to be first. It has the -C flag to change to the right location. It's starting from the right place. We are the same root user. Okay. And like I said, it's not going to have the right ownership, but I'm okay with that. And then we need to just, we're done with our test, so let's clean up this junk that's here. Okay, what's left? Just the chain. So let's add that to the stage and commit it and say switch from unarchived to shell command. This is for 375. Push it up. So one piece that we're not going to get finished tonight, we're kind of running long as is, and I'm sort of pushing how much more I want to bite off. One piece that we're not going to finish is the actual cleanup, the removal of the other parts that are generating collect static or generating static assets. I guess we've already turned that off because collect static, the thing that we commented out up here, is what does everything that's built locally is in a local directory that then gets copied into static root, which is just built into the Django settings, which is why you can't really see it here. But this is the final step to move it over. So by taking it out of here, we've effectively turned it off, which means that once I'm happy with how this scheme is putting assets into the directory, then we can go start tearing out everything, and that will be super satisfying because it will get us get the removal of collect static, which is a Django management command that's running in here. It will remove npm entirely because all that stuff was pushed up to CI. It will remove Node.js. Like I don't need Node on there, so it's going to have a massive kind of ripple effect, and we'll finally be able to get some of the benefit of all of this deployment stuff. So I've said this before, but I'm going through the stage of like bloating deployment to try and switch over in case I ever needed to, like, in case something went horribly wrong and this scheme didn't work, I'd be able to like back it out to the older scheme. But I think we're reaching a very close point where this is doing what we think it should be doing, and then we get all that satisfaction of tearing out the old stuff. Okay, let's go back to Circle and check it out. The whole thing is done. All the pipeline is complete. There's no need to check out more there. So we can now say Vagrant Provision. And so I haven't had to pull anything. How does that work? One of the things in here, I didn't call it out at any point, but my my local virtual machine that's here does a git fetch to get the latest SHA. And so that's the magic that makes this deploy the new version, in case you were curious of what's going on. So and there it is right there, fetch from GitHub. So two things we're gonna do next. We're going to confirm the permissions are set to root, which I think will be the case, and we'll do the chown stuff to change the directories or all the content in that directory to be the right group and owner, and that's probably where I'll stop tonight. And then next week we can run the test that will blow the whole directory away and make sure that all works from scratch. Also, we need to actually test. I have not run a single test on the actual staging URL to see if these things are going to be pulled properly Can't imagine they'd be wrong, but things can go wrong. Yeah, like, for example, maybe there is something wrong. We did not restart Nginx. There's something I noticed. So we might need to restart Nginx as part of this. Okay. So there will probably be work to do, I guess is the point. Let's look over here and see what we've got. I think this is the right timestamp for this stuff. Yeah, it must be, because this is the static files thing that we need. Okay, so moment of truth. Why are all of these the same? Why is this the same timestamp? So look, it's got, this is fascinating. It has the different SHAs, so that means that the merge seemed to have gone well, but the timestamp is the same? I don't get that. I don't get what happened there. Let's look at the images and see what happened. Oh crap, none of those files are changing. So that's the hard part about this test, is that we're not changing other stuff. So when it wiped out all that data the first time, all right, so we're gonna have to, ooh, yuck. What happened here? Look at that owner. What is that? I don't even know what that is. What is 3434? Okay, so clearly some stuff did not go awesomely. 3434. That's super confusing. Maybe it's trying to, I don't even know what that would be. Could that be, is it trying to preserve the owner from my Mac OS? That could be it. How would I figure out there's like a user command or something? Okay, I'm at the depths of my Linux knowledge at this point, so I'm wondering if there's a way, like, my speculation right now is that that the mat user on my local OS has a user ID of 3434. And when we're running the tar, it's using, oh, no. Remember, this stuff was generated in CI, so the CI user could be 3434. That's probably more likely the case. Well, we definitely need to do a chown on it. And I want to do one other little test to make sure that this merges properly. So I'm going to touch images foo.jpg. Okay, so that will be a root owned file in images, which is not cool. Let's go in there and change it to I never remember how to use chown either. Owner, the group, and the file. Okay, so let's chown www data data for foo.jpg, and now you can see that it'll be in there. I want to run that provision command again and see if when it tries to do the tar again, if it destroys this file or not. That will be the test that will confirm if the merge is working the way that we want it to, I think. And that's probably where we'll call it a night. Like this step takes a lot of work and a lot of the time, but this is where the JavaScript building is happening. But when that goes away, the build gets faster. When this, or actually that was just to do the npm install. This also takes a bunch of the time. That will go away. The build gets faster. Or deploy. Sorry, I keep saying build. Looks like we'll also need to change that flag because we don't want to get warned about using tar just because there's something built in. Okay, that's something else we can do. Okay. Foo JPEG is still there. So I think it merged everything properly. Cool. Should we finish off with the chown? First thing we want to do is change this warn to true, I think is what it said. Or false. Change that to false, so that will leave us alone in the future because we're doing this special thing where we don't want to have a complaint about using unarchive because unarchive didn't have quite the behavior that we wanted. So that gives us confidence that that is right. And then the second thing that we need to do is do a chown command, but there might be, I do like trying to use Ansible modules when they're available. So there might be a chown, let's put a file. How do we set something recursively? There's recurse. What I want to be careful of is directories and files, I think, have different permission. Like, we want the files to be readable for sure to the www data. I mean, if you recall, I told this thing to be 644, and that's the right permission for a file. On the other hand, the directory needs to be executable, I think, in order to even like navigate to it. Is that right? I don't remember my directory permissions well enough. So I don't know what, if we chown the whole thing and it recurses and changes all of them, will the www data user be able to do the right thing? Well, okay. Let's try it anyway. We're going to, there's got to be a recurse example in here. There it is. This is pretty much exactly what we want. So let's finish this off. Let's see, we're going to say ensure www data owns static assets. So we want to become yes, because we need to do this as start from root. And this is a file thing. And it's going to work on the file, we want the path, and that is static root. And the, sorry, starting to get late. My brain is starting to fade fast. It's a directory. We want it to recurse through all the files in that directory. And we want the owner to be www data. We want the group to be www data. And we want the mode to be 644. That's my belief anyway. Okay. So the nice part about testing deploys is because Ansible wants to run from what's local as the commands, I don't actually have to commit this in order to try a new deployment configuration out. We can run Vagrant Provision again and let it do its thing. Oh, it's warning me about something. Okay, warning. So apparently so we got warned to use warn, and then they're telling us that warn is not the right attribute. Thanks, Ansible. Ansible task warn false. Oh, okay. Maybe it goes on the shell command, specific to shell. Got it. Okay. So I think I have it one directory out too far. So here, it needs to be an arg. Okay. I'll just save that and assume it's right in the future. So we didn't do it right, so it's complaining. But here, changed ownership. So now we should be able to look at this directory. Would be fine. One example. Everything is 644. Can we still navigate to directories? So maybe I'm thinking about the wrong aspect of directories. I thought they had to be executable. Maybe they have to be executable for adding files or something. Linux directory executable. Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. Okay, see here. Allows you to change into this directory. So I am not the root account, or I am the root account right now. So it's very possible that I'm able to change into the image directory because root can do whatever the heck it wants. So when Nginx runs and runs with www data permissions, it might actually blow up trying to fetch any images because it won't be able to open these directories. So I might need to, how do you give just the directories on a chown a different permission? That's an interesting problem, and probably one that I'll have to research online, but do it offline from the stream. So I think that's where we're going to call it for tonight. Next time on the stream, we're going to clean this up and then start testing it out, and then testing out different scenarios. The recording I will put on YouTube. So if there's anything you want to refer back to that you might have missed, you can certainly do that. I will probably be streaming next Wednesday, as far as I know. I think my calendar permits that. If you want to catch up with me on social media, I am MB Lehman on Twitter. You're welcome to give me a follow on Twitch or a like on the YouTube video if you're catching this way later. Every little bit helps me to get discovered and helps me share what I know about developing web applications with others. I really appreciate everyone's feedback and the discussion, some of the discussion that happened today. But if you have feedback about the overall stream and things I can make better, please reach out to me on Twitter and let me know what you like or didn't like. I'd be really grateful. So with that, I think that's going to call it a night, and I'll talk to you later. Take care.